Welcome to Beyond Awareness Podcast, a conversation brought to you by United Against Human Trafficking, where we believe all people are deserving of freedom, resources, and support. Join us monthly as we educate, analyze, and connect with communities to examine the challenges of triumphs in the fight against human trafficking and explore what it truly means to support survivors. Without further ado, let's dive deeper, forever be students of one another, and unite together in the fight against human trafficking. We are so excited to be here. Thank you so much to our listeners for tuning in. We have two great guests here with us. We have Carrie and Taylor, and I am going to allow them to introduce themselves.
Hi, my name is Carrie Rye. I am the executive director of Tony's Place. And if you're not familiar with Tony's Place, our mission is to support and empower LGBTQ youth. We serve youth between the ages of 14 and 25. We offer a drop-in center where youth can access their basic needs like laundry, clothing, hygiene supplies, showers, anything they really need to just survive. But then we also provide wraparound case management one-on-one support. So we have case managers that will sit down with an individual, map out what their goals are, what do they want to achieve, whether that's access to housing, employment, education, improving their relationships, whatever that looks like. Young people can come and engage in those services. One of the things that Tony's Place is really proud of is our partnerships with other organizations. And, Taylor and United Against Human Trafficking is one of those partners. Tony's Place knows that we cannot be all things to everybody, but we can create a safe space. And we allow community partners to come in and do what they do best. So partners like United Against Human Trafficking come in and offer groups. Taylor runs our groups. They are amazing. It's a way to engage with our youth. And we find it very, very important to make those connections in our center on site because our youth are more likely to follow up, engage in those services. And I could say, hey, this is Taylor. He can sit down and talk to you or whatever that looks like. A little bit about me. I am a licensed social worker. I've been working in social services since the early 2000s. I am born and raised in Canada, and my schooling has been in Canada. I moved down to Texas straight from Canada 10 years ago. And when I moved down from Canada, I went into homeless service work. And along my journey, I've recognized that I'm part of the LGBTQ community myself. My husband is a trans person. He works in the homeless space. So, that's how I got here.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah. My name is Taylor Woodruff. I am the Outreach and Prevention Manager for United Against Human Trafficking. United Against Human Trafficking, if you aren't already aware of us, we have three main pillars. First is education. We want to really equip people who serve on the front lines how to recognize and respond to human trafficking. Second, we work in prevention. And just like Carrie was saying, we work with external partners. Again, we can't be everywhere at once. And we love partnering and equipping and stirring the pot conversation of recognizing the vulnerabilities where trafficking exists and bringing in tools to help those who are facing exploitation. And then our third pillar is we have a wonderful client services department where those who have faced exploitation can help get the autonomy restored that was robbed of them with our case managers who will walk hand in hand, assisting them with finding housing, transportation, medical appointments, really helping, again, restore that autonomy.
Thank you so much. Always, Taylor. In season 1, we are identifying the intersections of human trafficking and how it intersects with so many different populations. On this episode, we're talking about our LGBTQ youth and the vulnerabilities. So, Carrie, what challenges do you see youth facing that others may not see in the LGBTQ community?
So at Tony's Place, we serve LGBTQ youth, and the majority of those youth are unstably housed or homeless. The youth we see either have not had great family support, whether that's because their parents were not around or the youth themselves were involved in systems like foster care, juvenile justice. And our clients do not have great role models to show them what it's like to be an adult in this world. Particularly the LGBTQ youth that we see, they do not have family support. And that's whether they're coming from poverty and their family just does not have the means or the capabilities to support them, or they've been rejected by their family for who they are. A lot of parents I've talked to will say, well, how can someone reject their kid for being gay or being queer? And what we've found is that people say that until it's their own kid, and then it's not okay. And our youth, they pick up on things very easily. So many of them will leave home before they even come out because of fear of how they'll be received by their family. So it's not an open, overt objection against who they are, but they feel it. They don't feel safe. They rather be on the street, partner with their peer group, than be that vulnerable with the guardians in their lives. So one of the biggest challenge is the high rates of homelessness. So last year, the homeless system in Houston, we did our first youth point in time count. All of the youth that we spoke to were either unhoused, literally unhoused, so sleeping on the street or sleeping in a car, or in a place not meant for human habitation. So maybe an abandoned building or what they call bandos. And in that survey, at least 40% of youth identified that they are from the LGBTQ community. And that's openly identified. So to me, that says there's a lot more youth who are homeless out there that are actually a part of the community and have not disclosed that. This is a huge discrepancy it is disproportionate to the LGBTQ people in the broader community. There are a lot of, so going back to your question about challenges, there's increased risk for homelessness. Majority of our youth are people of color. 85% of the youth that come through our door are Black, African-American, or Hispanic. So there is a lot of intersectionalities and challenge with how others perceive them, with their race, ethnicity, their sexual orientation or gender expression, then their homeless status. And all of this compounds for minority stress that when I see a youth having a bad day, no wonder they're having a bad day. Mm-hmm. I would be having a worse day if I had their experiences. Right. So, yeah, I don't know if that answers the question.
Taylor, Carrie mentioned unstable housing, being homeless, no family support, little to no role models. How does that increase the vulnerability of being trafficked?
So there's something called an ACE score. And what that is an adverse childhood experience. And we see historically the higher the ACE score that is in a victim of trafficking, the higher the likelihood of them being exploited. Being in foster care, being in the juvenile justice system, those are all things that raise somebody's ACE score. And to your question of how does homelessness affect? Well, if you don't have a home, you're removing the safety, security, and privacy of a person. How many times have we said to ourselves, and this is a very minimal comparison, but like, oh man, I would kill for that right now, whether it's regarding, a food or a drink or something. Mm-hmm. Think about that maximized of when you don't, or even right now, if you're having a hard day listening to this, or you're at the office, you think to yourself, oh, okay, well, I can't wait to get home. When you don't have that, you are have a higher rate of vulnerability. And we see that within homeless youth, 20 to 40% are LGBTQ youth. And that makes it easier for someone to be exploited when you don't have that security, when you don't have that privacy. You're more easy to be groomed, and because LGBTQ are part of a marginalized population, they are more, to be approached, and they're more in need of resources. They're more susceptible to grooming.
Can you go a little bit deeper into the grooming process and what that looks like?
So grooming is one of those things where we're trying to kind of lead somebody to do something that is against their will. Speaking for trafficking victims, we're listening to one testimony of a case that came across when I ran the human trafficking hotline, and a girl told me that she entered a modeling ad online, and when she answered it, the photographer said, "Hey, you'll make more money if you take your top off." Okay, kind of appealing to her to do something that is kind of against her boundaries, but there's more in it for you. Kind of grooming that person, or hey, if you want to come live with me while you get your housing straight or while you look for a job, you can do that. But when someone, is welcome to at home, it's like, oh, no, this is what you have to do for me while you're living here. We call that survival sex, meaning you're exchanging sex for the basic necessities, not just money, but for food or even for a cell phone, clothing, transportation, all those things.
I have a couple of questions in my head. I'm trying to figure out which one to ask first. So we'll just kind of allow that to flow a little bit. What does safety look like for an LGBTQ youth? What does that look like?
That looks like an affirming place where they can lay their head. They are not experiencing discrimination based on who they are, how they appear. And when I say safe, or a safe and affirming space, there is no risk of exploitation. They do not have to give anything in return for a bed. A lot of our youth end up doing that, like Taylor said, and to sleep at somebody's house, then they may ask you for sexual favors, or they may say, hey, you need to bring in X amount of money into this house. That is not a safe space to be. And our clients, our young people, they may not pick up on these subtle things that happen. And before they know it, they're doing things that they never thought they were going to do. Or, if you would ask them straight up, would you do this? They'd be like, of course not. But over time, because they feel obligated to give back for a safe space, because they've had to struggle for that safe space, it becomes an obligation that they feel they have to.
Thank you. Do you want to add to that?
No, I kind of want to say, first off, entering into this conversation, I do want to acknowledge that I am a cis, white, straight male. So when I speak on these things that we're discussing regarding issues of the LGBTQ plus population, I'm speaking on my experience of doing trafficking work and the intersection with that community. So regarding that, historically, and research shows us that the average age of someone being exploited is 14 years old, which is why we find it, we focus on prevention work with youth. And so when I think of a safe space, I think of the youth. I think of being a part of a school that is affirming to them, being part of a community that, we all struggled with like our identity, even probably some as adults. but even more so growing up as a teenager of who we are. I think having a support system that really equips and affirms someone's journey in discovering who they are, I think is a big part of a safe space.
I just want to add on to that. A safe environment, a safe person is affirming because of who the person is, not despite who they are. And I think there's a very big difference there, because I'm going to celebrate you just because you are you, not because, oh, I can dismiss this in my head and I still like you. So there is a difference, because I think some youth feel unsupported in spaces because they feel like, well, they're just tolerating me for X, Y, and Z.
Right.
Not because I am who I am.
Right. I was trying to save this for last, but it keeps coming up in my brain, so I have to talk about it now. What would you say to family members about LGBTQ child and how they can better support their family member?
In my experience, parents become upset because they have a vision for their child. They have envisioned since they came into this world, they were, conceived about what their future would look like. I think a lot of parents need to let go and realize that this is an individual person who is going to create their own future, who's going to love whomever they love, who's going to look however they look, and to take away those expectations. When I first introduced my husband, I'm like, yes, he's a trans man and I'm pansexual. My mom turns to me and says, so have you always been a lesbian? It's like, no, Mom, it's not. And a lot of it is education, because it doesn't matter who you love or how you love. And I think that's important for parents to realize. It doesn't change the core person about who they love or how they want to dress or how they want to present themselves to the world. And there's bigger things to worry about in this world.
Right. Can you add to that, Taylor, but on the community side, what can the community do better?
I would say the biggest thing we can do as a community is, going back to Carrie said, I really want to say this, is accepting everybody as they are. Okay. Even though Tony's Place serves LGBTQ plus population, you don't have to be part of that community to come in.
Correct.
Okay. If you're a straight person, you can come in. I think we need to really embrace what that looks like, just accepting people as they are. Okay. And from the community side, a lot of times, our general response to something is we're modeling what the tone should be towards towards all populations. If there is there's discriminatory language towards a certain population, that is going to be, that's going to be the general consensus, and it's going to create an uncomfortable and unwelcoming and dangerous environment. And so we need to really, as a community, model the response. We need to model the response out of love and acceptance.
Just to add on to that, Taylor, when someone feels rejected or unaccepted for who they are, it's a human basic need to want to seek out acceptance. And unfortunately, some of our youth, our LGBTQ youth, end up seeking acceptance in places where they're going to be taken advantage of or exploited, because it is a need to be loved and cared for and wanted. And I think that is a huge part of, or it is a contributing factor to why people leave home. They are seeking that kind of connection with others.
I keep hearing education, education, education. Even though you haven't said it, that's what's in my head. And educating the community to understand the differences just across the board. What does that look like for you, Taylor? I mean, how do you feel about?
So when I think education, I think of just listening. I think, as I said earlier, I'm a straight white male. I can look at statistics, and academically, I can look at and read about the history of LGBTQ rights. But I think until we really take it upon ourselves to listen and be a part of communities proactively, that's when we educate ourselves, not just by reading about something, not just by looking at statistics or a 5-minute YouTube video. It's when we take the time to share a meal, listen, be in the same spaces, share those spaces. I think that does more than any kind of research paper or any kind of PowerPoint will ever do when it comes to educating and making ourselves aware and knowledgeable about some of the things or all the things that LGBTQ plus populations are facing.
Let's talk a little bit about barriers and gaps in services.
So one of the things that we see is, number one, a lot of times going back to survival sex, because LGBTQ plus identify maybe more gender fluid than a lot of people, there is and Carrie, correct me wrong if I'm using the wrong language here, but people will dismiss it as, oh, they're willingly participating in prostitution. They're willingly participating in commercial sex acts. They don't make the connection that they're probably doing this against their will. Okay, they're doing this for survival. I think that's one of the things that they're facing. Two, any population that is discriminated against, you're going to have economic instability, which is going to then add to a higher vulnerability. Okay, so I think we have to look at that discrimination and the resources that are out there. Okay. So that's a big one. And then also we have to get over our own barriers. People want to naturally serve people that they feel more comfortable, and I use that word comfortable loosely, that they kind of identify with. I was talking to one trafficking survivor, and she told me she was a trans woman, that when she went to the emergency room after being sexually assaulted and was talking to the ER doctor, the doctor said, "Oh, you don't need a doctor, you need Jesus."
Wow.
And just for that doctor not to see the humanity, right, versus just, not to see her, but just only her sexual identity, and I can't think about how heartbreaking it's got to be that moment where someone's at a place of vulnerability, asking for help, and just to be dismissed by someone whose primary job is to assist and care for somebody.
Wow.
You asked about barriers. So there's a couple things that come to mind. When our young people leave home, they typically do not think, I need to take my birth certificate, I should take my social security card, I need to take documents that show who I am, that sort of thing. Many of our youth do not have those documents. That's going to prevent somebody from getting a job, getting housing, all sorts of things. So at Tony's Place, we do help to get IDs. They can use our address as a mailing address to get their birth certificates or things like that. Another barrier is when youth are really young. When I say young, 14 to 17, they're in that age group that if someone runs away from home, we make a CPS report. There's no fault on CPS. They're strapped with resources. They're focused on the most vulnerable. So that would look like a baby or a 2-year-old that's in the care of a parent. 14, 15, 16-year-old, I don't think CPS has the bandwidth to care as intensely as they would like to for those individuals. So when those individuals leave home, there's not a lot of resources for them. If you're 17 and you don't have official emancipation from your family, you cannot sign a lease. You cannot make your own body autonomy decisions for some things around your health, mental health. I would advocate that in Texas, we lower the age of consent to about 16. I think that would help 16, 17-year-olds get access to resources that they are ineligible for because they're too young, but our system does not have the capacity to care for them in a foster home, a group home, or give the family the support that they need in home to keep the child there.
When you guys were talking, I was thinking about gender identification as well as a barrier. I used to work in an agency where, you couldn't get help if you identified outside of your birth certificate. Can we talk a little bit about that and what that looks like and how that can be an added layer?
It can be very challenging if your documents say male, but you show up someplace presenting very feminine. If your ID does not match how you present, there are a lot of challenges and around is this really who you are, who you say you are? One barrier that LGBTQ organizations are facing is that some federal funding is putting clauses in that organizations need to support the gender binary. We know that gender is not black, white, this or that. It is on a spectrum. So that's going to threaten or cause some organizations to maybe not apply for funding to serve their population or, not being compliant.
Yeah, I think, just last year working within the Houston nonprofit community, we saw a lot of scrubbing of people's websites of DEI.
Yes.
A lot of people were quick. And again, I'm not trying to cast shade, but we did see a lot of people kind of let go of their DEI as part of their mission statement because they did not want to risk losing funds that keep the agency running and carrying out its mission. Tony's Place, has not compromised. I'm proud to say UHT, we did not do anything to change our mission in DEI. We're still here, but even just a barrier of trying to help those who are accounting barriers, that's a barrier we're facing and other agencies are facing itself.
Thank you for saying that. And so when you were talking about the gender identity, I was thinking about just something simple as getting an ID is hard. Getting a passport is really hard because of how you self-identify versus what society says you are.
And I think some of the challenge is that someone might be able to get certain documents changed to match your gender identity or gender expression, but not all may be able to be changed. And so when there's discrepancy, my birth certificate says this, my ID says this, and you go to apply for a job or go for housing and you have to present those things, there's already fear about, are they going to accept me for who I am? And now they're going to see a paper discrepancy. That contributes to kind of gaps and barriers and putting people in vulnerable situations because they do not have the options as someone who's a cis person. Their ID matches exactly.
When I hear that, and we're going to transition a little bit into mental health, because if you finally got to a point where you feel accepted by most people, right, most in the community, whatever's going on around you, but you go to try to purchase a home or whatever, it's almost like it's pushing you back into that space where you started off at the beginning. So that is disheartening to think about.
It is. And I've heard people describe it like, you don't just come out once, you're coming out every day.
Wow.
Every single space you step into, you're assessing, can I show up as my authentic self, or do I have to keep things hidden? So yeah, when the people are like, oh, I came out, it's like you're coming out every day and you're assessing that risk. Is it okay or not okay? And based on that kind of mental risk assessment, people may or may not engage in opportunities that are in front of them, and they may not see those as actual realistic choices that they can make. And they end up only being in situations where they are exploited or taken advantage of.
And speaking of that, did you want to add to that?
Yeah. So we talk about going back, and Carrie talked about people just coming out every day. This was an article that came out this week where a trans woman was profiled at Madison Square Garden, where people the camera would focus on her, security would focus on her. They created a dossier just because they're like, what's this person doing here watching male sports, to the point where they've, did surveillance to get her, when she went back to her residence. And she's not doing anything other than just watching a game, things that we all are allowed to do. And yet she's being profiled and surveyed just for existing.
Right.
And think about how, I can't imagine. But just how marginalized and how ostracized you have to feel just for existing and partaking something that everybody is doing. But yet you're the person doing that.
Right.
You're the person facing that.
So I'm thinking about, again, mental health and what that looks like and how it, that's really big when it comes down to exploitation, right? I remember talking with my therapist a little while ago, and I was telling her I didn't want to make an appointment because I thought I was crazy at one point. It was something I was going through, and I was like, I just feel crazy. And she responded and said, I don't see crazy people, And so I want to, go ahead.
So I'm going to say something that may not sit well with everybody, but concepts of mental health, mental illness, those are socially constructed. A lot of people who believe they've been diagnosed or have a mental health issue, they really don't have a mental health issue. It is their issue, their response to a common human experience. It is normal. It is normal to not feel good sometimes. It is normal to have anxiety. That should be more normalized. And so adding that stigma on that you have a mental health problem, it's like, no, you're not the problem. It's what's happening to you is the problem. Mm-hmm.
I think about mental health. Being mentally healthy is a good thing. Having faith is a good thing. But I think some people in society weaponize both of them, right? It's like, you need help. You're crazy. You need to go see somebody because of how you identify. You need Jesus, right? We need to pray for you so we could cure you or heal you.
But I think that goes back to people thinking that there is something intrinsically wrong with that person when there's nothing wrong with them at all. They are perfect who they are. They are just experiencing a lot of crap. And so their response to that may not look as mentally well. But like I said, I'd probably be acting way crazier and way more if I had the similar experiences.
Right.
LGBTQ youth are doing the best they can to manage. And a lot of them don't have that support system or even learn how to regulate their emotions. Their brains are still developing, into their 20s. They haven't had, they don't have parents saying, okay, you really should be doing this, this, and this. They have their peer group that's their largest influence.
And also the trauma that they're experiencing that's going to stunt that social development in a way. Think about just, just the trauma of being homeless or being sexually victim of sexual violence, how that is going to warp your sense of identity and growth and development. I think going back to just, feeling crazy and mental health, I think we as people need to get over this notion of feeling safe only with people who we can't identify with, or just maybe broaden our idea of who we identify with versus just someone who believes in the same things as we do, or is straight like us, or who's the same, feeling comfortable, because they look similar to me.
Can I maybe rephrase that?
Yes, please.
In a different way? Because I totally agree with you. But it is part of the human condition to be like, this is my people and these are the others to other people. I think we need to create our in-group is wider than what we've originally thought. Yeah. So we don't other people as much. We are all of the in-group.
As we go towards a close, I would love for either of you or both of you to, if there's a story or someone's story you would like to share.
Some of my most memorable the stories that I share, and it's just from the time I'm in Tony's place and the vulnerability that the clients there, how vulnerable they are when we do our program. It's called Real Talk. And, even though we are a anti-human trafficking agency and in our prevention work, in our Real Talk program, we hardly even mention trafficking. What we talk about is relationships. What we talk about is boundaries. We talk about how we process trauma, all these things, because we do see there is an intersection between those topics and trafficking.
Right.
We talk about boundaries and healthy relationships because we see relational trafficking being the majority of how people are trafficked. And so the vulnerability that whenever we do programs at Tony's Place, the vulnerability that the clients are willing to share about their own experience, their own resilience, their own, the things that they face growing up and how they don't want that for themselves and they want better for themselves or are striving towards that. Those are the things that resonate with me. And the fact that, and I'm just going to brag on Tony's Place is, they're consistent. And I think it is so important to be consistent for people who have never received consistency in their lives. Rain or shine, you guys open your doors, you serve a hot meal, you give them bus tickets so they can get back. So they, it's time well spent there. Every day you're having different partners there. And just the consistency and, so I wish we could, we're there and we every other week we try to be, but when just the kind of openness and vulnerability, but also the warmth that the staff, the clients that we get to be a part of are is probably my high points.
I'm glad you mentioned that, and thank you for the compliments of Tony's Place. The biggest challenge I see with our young people is developing trust. They've been rejected, they've been violated, and showing up every day, that shows consistency, like you said, and it builds trust. And it's a healthy example of what it looks like to show up for somebody. And a lot of these youth do not have anybody that's going to show up with them consistently every single day. Doesn't matter if you yell at me. Doesn't matter if, you're rude. We're going to be there tomorrow, right? And I think that's what they need, is that consistency. And what I appreciate about you, Taylor, is that you're in our center at least once a month. So they see your face, they get to know you, and they're like, oh yeah, it's Taylor's group today. And that is really important. And I think it's value to them.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
So as we close, and speaking of consistency and showing up, what would you say to family members, community, teachers? What can they do better?
I would say model what love should look like. And I say this thinking about how people growing up model love after what they saw in their own families. And sometimes those aren't the most healthy examples. There was a person who was trafficked who said that they let their partner hit them because she saw her dad hit her mom. And she's like, okay, that's just what love looks like. It's just, violence is part of it. I think aspire to what love should look like. And that means zero hate, zero judgment, zero discrimination, acceptance, assistance, respect, patience, all the things that we want love, we should model what we think it should look like. So.
And when you first asked that question, the first word that came to mind was love. I do this myself. When I realize I'm disappointed in something, it's because I have projected my own expectations onto somebody, and that is not love. It is loving them no matter what. And for families, for community partners, I think is being forgiving, giving grace, and just being open to recognizing that your own way of doing things, your own thoughts, that's not the only way. That everybody is an individual person and everybody needs to be looked at without expectation.
Go ahead.
Now I want to ask you the same question.
I am the host. Go ahead.
No, what do you think we as a community or as parents could do better?
I'm going to land on love as well, but love is different for people. We create our own love in our own heads. And as you two were talking, I was thinking about, and I don't want to go here, but because it may sting, but I was thinking about faith and faith-based communities. And I believe that they identify love in their own little way. Love is in a little pocket, right? And love is for everybody. Love is fluid. It's inviting. It's welcoming. It's kind. It's all of those great things. But unfortunately, I feel like society places limits and boundaries around love. But love is love. It's everywhere. It's all things, all people. So that's how I look at what we should be doing moving forward, is loving people and not what they identify, how they identify, what they look like, but loving people. Maybe if we think about loving the soul of the person, what's inside, what helps them to breathe, right? The heart of a person, and just get away from the outer layer, maybe that would help all of us.
Yeah.
What would you say to LGBTQ youth now as we are leaving this podcast? That young person who's struggling with identity, struggling at home, struggling with letting people know or talking to their parents, not knowing what to do, struggling with isolation, and they're just right at that breaking point.
I would say that your people are out there, and anybody who says they're your person and causes you harm, they are not your person. But there is a whole community out there that will love you, accept you for who you are. Do not compromise anything. Do not feel like you need to sacrifice anything in order to be accepted. There are groups, there's people that are just going to see you for who you are and love that. Don't compromise.
Yeah. No, I love that. I would say number one, just, the discrimination they have probably faced, the hate or the rejection, just to empathize and say, your people are out there, and one, acknowledge that they face that and sit with them in that. And I think we need to kind of see and speak on those things. And how, even though you talked about love and then the inner me seeing the inner you, we need to also recognize the hurt, even though we've never may have faced that rejection or discrimination, but to at least kind of sit and empathize and acknowledge that hurt with that person. And just like, I'm not trying to be too campy, but just saying like my heart breaks, that you're experiencing that without being just too surface level, but just kind of recognize that hurt that they're going through. And two, just kind of walk with somebody in that way. And say, even though can't relate and I'm not going to pretend to, because I can't imagine, my mind can't comprehend the level of hurt that probably registers on. I at least want to walk with you during this time, or just talk to you, be open with you, talk to me with this, share, break bread. I love that Tony's Place, when they open their doors, meals to follow. So I think just breaking bread, and then our CEO always talks about the importance of breaking bread with one another, because you kind of see the humanity in somebody when you break that bread. So,
and I think that perfectly ties into expanding your in-group, right? Who you want to be around and who you accept, and who, when you have something in common, the othering of people decreases.
That's my new favorite word, the othering.
Othering. Taylor, can you leave us with...
Gosh.
No, it's just... Can you leave us with what to look out for, warning signs of exploitation for our listeners?
Mm-hmm. So when we're talking about the warning signs, we're talking about a lot of things is when we talk about survival sex, we're talking about usually someone who doesn't have their own freedom of movement. They don't have their cell phone. There's someone controlling their documents. They don't have their own communication devices, or they can't speak on something because this other person's in the room. If there's, in the instance that someone's staying at a shelter and they're trying to talk to you, and someone else comes in and they suddenly stop talking. That's a red flag right there. If someone all of a sudden has a lot of nice things, not cash, but things, but we know that that's not representative of their living situation. Again, we need to recognize exploitation or trafficking is exchange of something of value, not just money, but value. So that can be clothes, it can be cell phones, it could be jewelry, anything.
Thank you guys for being our guest. We really appreciate you. We appreciate what you bring to the table. We appreciate the work that you do in the community. So thanks again for joining us.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of Beyond Awareness. If today's conversation resonated with you, we encourage you to share this episode. If this is your first time hearing about our work, you can learn more at uaht.org or find us on social media. We are United Against Human Trafficking. Thank you for being part of the movement. Until all are free, I'm Rhonda Holmes.